Hello out there again, maybe. Feel free to skip this intro if you've been here before and you know what these videos are going to be about. So I highly doubt that there'll be much interest, if any, in these videos, but it was a useful project from my point of view. When I was looking at upgrading my old perpetual version of Lightroom 5.7, which was released way back in 2014. And before going down the Adobe subscription route, because I was very anti-subscription for a long time, hence why I've stuck with Lightroom 5.7 for such a long time, I wanted to just check to see whether there was any other software options out there that would give me the same functionality as Lightroom moving forward. So I explored quite a lot of software, and I'll just scroll through the list again now, just trying to find that software that I might have overlooked in the past, just to see how well they compared to Lightroom. And for this project, I was mainly just interested in seeing what starting positions each of the software that I tried offered up, because obviously in all packages you can edit images to your heart's content to get it to a point that you're happy with to achieve your vision. But for a quick workflow, it would be great if the software rendered your image in a way that was pleasing, so you didn't then have to spend minutes or hours editing the image to get it to where you wanted it to go. The reason why I was considering Adobe in the first place is I wanted to speed up and simplify my workflow, because obviously my old version of Lightroom was no longer compatible with some of the newer cameras I had, certainly not the Fujifilm X-H1. So as I mentioned in this video, which is the precursor to this series of videos, I eventually ended up going with an Adobe subscription, but I didn't really want my thoughts on the software that I trialed to go to waste, hence why I came up with the idea of this series of videos, because hopefully there might be some people out there, hopefully, that are in a similar position to me and want to explore other software options before subscribing to Adobe or Capture One or whatever, just to see what I thought of them, and especially if you haven't got the time or the patience to do a similar exercise in terms of comparing all of these programs. So yeah, I'll briefly talk about my thoughts of the actual programs when I trialed them, in terms of whether I actually liked the software, what I liked, what I didn't like about the software, how it compared to Lightroom, for instance, and the occasional rant about certain software, as well as hopefully some interesting tidbits in there somewhere, maybe. Yeah, so then I'll jump into the comparisons and I'll compare the images, the straight images, so literally just taking into the software, apply the appropriate starting profile preset, and then export them out, put them into Lightroom so I can compare them easily with Lightroom's own efforts and with the software that I liked the best in terms of rendering each scene from each camera. And finally, I will add my thoughts on using Adobe Lightroom Classic, because I've been running this project now for nearly a year. So I've been using Adobe Lightroom for about 9 months now. So I will certainly offer up my thoughts on my experiences thus far. So let's get started for the first time, or get on with the comparisons if you've been here before. So to finish the comparisons, I'm just going to talk about my experiences and thoughts, because I've been using Adobe's Lightroom Classic now for about 9 months. And that's the desktop version rather than the mobile stroke website version, although I have used and dabbled with the mobile version to some degree, but I'll talk about that later on. So how well has it been going? I would say it's been going fairly well. It's definitely been welcome that it now supports all of my camera types. So literally I can import all my photos into Lightroom and then just process them. So that does speed up my workflow considerably. And since I've had it, Adobe, to give them some credit, have introduced some cool and powerful new features, such as the Denoise AI tool, which is much better than their previous noise reduction sliders in Lightroom, in my opinion. And also as well, I find that their auto selection of your subjects and sky and other elements in your photo to be absolutely brilliant. It really does help focus the masks to where they're needed, so you can then apply those targeted adjustments. There are, however, some aspects of Lightroom that could be better for me. I don't find it all that fast in operation and use, despite my decent laptop specifications. It's a Ryzen 7 with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a separate video card, a GeForce RTX, with its own RAM as well. So I'm really quite surprised that it still seems to be a little bit sluggish. So when I load in images, for example, it takes quite a while for them to fully render the raw file. So if I'm trying to review images quickly to determine which ones I'm going to be keeping, it is quite challenging that it takes a while for the software to render those images so I can make that decision. I also find the processing time for AI denoise quite slow. Like I did use DxO's Pure Raw 3, and that does seem to operate a lot quicker than Adobe's efforts. But it is their first effort, and I'm sure with a few updates that they can match DxO's performance with respect to that tool. However, it does do that function in the background, so you can get on with other tasks. I also find as well with exporting files, which are done relatively quickly, but all that again happens in the background, so you can get on with other stuff in Lightroom. So this is the library module within Lightroom, and out of all the software I've trialed throughout this project, I find that Adobe's Lightroom functionality is basically unparalleled. It just works so well. I just love cataloging my photos with keywords, with ratings. Certainly in this project I've used color coding, and yeah, I do find the functionality great. And even though I upload all my photos to like a web cloud service, still searching those photos via that method is quite slow. But if I'm interested in a particular subject in Lightroom, it's really easy because of all those keywords that I've assigned to my images, just to search through the keyword list and bring up all the photos associated with a specific keyword or multiple keywords, especially when you use the smart collections, in that you can say, right, call up all photos where I feature and that I rated them 3 stars and above, for example. Or likewise, all my monochrome images, which are 4 stars and above, for instance, and it will do that quite happily in a collection, which will then update with the more photos that you add to it. So I do really do love the library functionality within Adobe, and it's one of the main reasons why I've probably stuck with the software and decided eventually that a subscription was the right time for me. However, unbeknownst to me before subscribing to Lightroom was the fact that you can actually use the library module within Lightroom for free. Or if you decide, for instance, with your subscription that you don't want to pay for the software anymore, you still get to retain access to the library functionality within Lightroom for free. Well, I'm assuming you get access to that full functionality. It's something that I might have to explore in the future if I decide that I can't afford to subscribe, or whether I want to consider trying other programs in the future. Because then what you can do is you can, if the library function does work as advertised as it does now with the subscription, you can basically use Lightroom as your base program. So you can either use other software to edit files and then import them into Lightroom to catalog, or you can import all the files first into Lightroom and then use other programs as plugins to open within Lightroom, and then Lightroom will create that TIFF file to enable it to then open in the other software packages. Like for instance, I've already got Iridium X Transformer already linked in, as well as all my Nick collection plugins. And now basically, if I click on one of those, it will create a TIFF file, and then it'll take it into that program, so you can then edit it, save it, and then it will save all those changes back into Lightroom. So yeah, that's really useful to know for the future if I do consider coming away from Lightroom. So like I touched on at the start, I have tried the Lightroom mobile aspects. So initially, I found that the sync up of edits of what I've done on my mobile device, my tablet, and the desktop version didn't at first work, but I did a bit of Googling of the problem, as you do, and I found a site that directed you to basically optimize your catalog in Lightroom. And then when I did that, I found that the edits then began to sync across. So I haven't had any problems since. And it's really good, the mobile version, just to do those quick edits. Like if you're behind with a bit of your photo editing, like I am, I've got about 200 images waiting to be edited and catalogued correctly in Lightroom. So when I'm away from my desktop, using the mobile application is quite handy just to do some quick, fast edits. But then obviously, if there's a photo in there that I'm particularly pleased with, I would definitely wait until I'm on my laptop with the larger screen to do those quick edits. And I actually find the auto key quite useful, because it gives you a quick idea of what could be possible. And then you can either keep that and tweak the settings to suit more your taste, or just leave it like that until the edit syncs across to the desktop version, and then you can finish it when it comes across on the Lightroom Classic. So am I still happy with my decision I made to subscribe to Adobe? I'd say that it definitely meets most of my needs at the moment. Like I said before, it's simplified and sped up my workflow because all my camera types are now supported. But I'm not so sure anymore that a single one-size-fits-all solution moving forward is the best, as sometimes other software, as evidenced in these comparisons, can do a better job, especially at that starting position when you import it into a software. Sometimes they did do a much better job than what Lightroom could offer up. I wasn't originally going to be doing a similar comparison with Lightroom, but what I did try to do was create a virtual copy from the raw file. So the raw file, obviously, when I entered it in, I picked, like for instance, this is a Fuji X-E1 file, so I picked in the develop module the film simulation in Lightroom that I used when I shot the scene. But then I thought whether I could pick a different profile or look at the presets that Lightroom provides you for free to see whether there was something better that I could use that would equal, or at least equal, what my favourite comparison software could offer up, in this case Iridium X Transformer. But I gotta say, in most cases I just couldn't beat the software that I've chosen in the comparisons that I've thought offered up that best starting position, which is a little bit disappointing. And it goes back to the point where moving forward, I'm not sure that Lightroom will just be the only software that I use, because if I feel that it's not doing a particularly good job, then I certainly will use other software I have, like Iridium X Transformer for my Fuji X-E1 files, maybe Olympus Workspace sometimes for my Olympus files, and then Raw Therapy, the free software that I found particularly good at a lot of my files, just to see what it offers up when you take the image into that software as a starting position, which I can then export and then import into Lightroom to finish off the edit. I was even contemplating as well, because as you've probably seen from these comparisons coming up as well, that I actually found that Capture One did an amazing job on my Olympus EM1 Mark I files, but I'm not really sure that it's worth that kind of investment just for a single file type. So I think for now I'm just going to muddle on with what Lightroom can do And then, like I said, use Olympus Workspace and Raw Therapy when I'm really struggling with a particular image. So that's pretty much where I am with Lightroom. Like, I'm still happy with it, but I think I will, from time to time, use other programs if I need to. So let's head on over and have a look at some of the comparisons that you're all probably fed up with by now, and I know I am, but it's just these and then I'm done. Right, so let's just kick off with the Fuji XE1 files. So this is Lightroom's rendering, and then this is the Superior Orient X Transformer version. Like I said, I did try some other profiles and presets to try and get close to what Iridium offered up as a starting point, but I just couldn't really get much better than the original Previa profile within Lightroom. But you can do some crazy things with the embedded presets and profiles within Lightroom. Like these were just selecting a couple of presets, and I haven't done any other edits to it. So there is opportunity in Lightroom to find, sometimes if you're struggling, a profile or a preset which you can use as your starting position. Right, let's move on to the next image. So this is Lightroom's take on this XE1 image, and then this is the Superior Iridium again, which does do the best job with my Fuji XE1 files. As you can see in this image, so this is Lightroom's version. So that's the raw file in Lightroom with the Previa profile applied, and then this is Iridium's version, which again, like I said, does a better job. And then finally with this image, so this image is Lightroom, and then opposingly this time I actually found that Photolab 6 did do the better job, although I'm not entirely convinced with the blues. That would probably need a bit of tweaking in Lightroom, but overall the other tones I'm really happy with compared to Lightroom's effort. So let's move on to my Olympus files. So this is the Lightroom version, and then this is the excellent Capture One. And like I said, I did manage to get a little bit closer with Lightroom in this version here compared to the original version there. So whereas I think the original version used a starting preset or profile of Adobe Color, I actually found that Adobe Landscape profile did produce a little bit of a richer picture in this scenario. Similarly, this is Lightroom's effort for this image, whereas this is the amazing Capture One's rendition using its automatic film standard curve. And then again, I managed to get a little bit closer using the camera vivid profile this time, so that matches the profiles on the Olympus cameras, or tries to, a bit in a similar way to the Fuji film simulations, but still it probably doesn't do quite as good a job as Capture One, certainly with those greens. The greens in Capture One look a little bit more natural in this instance. And then moving on to the final Olympus image, so this is Lightroom's effort. I couldn't really get better than this time around. So this is Adobe Standard, which doesn't really compete with Capture One's efforts this time when it applied a linear response curve to the scene. So yeah, Capture One definitely a consideration if you're just using or just shooting with Olympus cameras. Right, so then moving on to the Fuji X-H1, which I no longer have because I just didn't really gel with the image quality that it could produce, certainly compared with the XE1. I'm happy to take a bit of a sacrifice on sharpness and resolution to get images that generally I prefer looking at. So that is Lightroom's effort, and that is Luminar, and hopefully you can see that Luminar did a much better job at extracting the nuances of all the different greens in the scene, whereas Lightroom, it just looks very one-dimensional in terms of the green tonality in the scene. And then likewise with this image, it didn't do a particularly good job either. So that's Lightroom. And then this was another raw therapy, which just makes it just for this scene, it just came across as more natural looking, whereas Olympus looked a little bit fake. And I'm not even sure how I would go about trying to recover that situation in Lightroom, to be honest. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I got rid of the Fuji X-H1. I just found that the raw files were hard to edit to get to where I wanted them to be. Whereas you compare that to the XE1, where Iridiant, or my older version of Iridiant, does an amazing job. And then even in some cases, the original straight out camera JPEG is good enough. So then moving on to the Canon 5D, and this time Adobe puts in a really good show. So that's Lightroom's version, and then this is raw therapy. So very, very close. I think I do slightly prefer Lightroom. I think raw therapy adds a little bit too much contrast, but I'd be happy with using either of these images as a starting position moving forward. And then finally, the final image, Lightroom was the superior image in this comparison, so hence why there's only one file. So that's it, that's Lightroom. So that's it, finally I've finished this series of videos, which probably no one out there was interested in, but as I said at the start, it was extremely useful for me in helping me make the decision to subscribe to Adobe Lightroom. I can now delete the 600 odd TIFF files that I've amassed since starting this project and free up some of my disk space and hopefully speed up Lightroom a little bit. That would be good. And I can now get back to work on some of the other content that I'm sure you'll probably be more interested in, and hopefully catch up on some of my editing, because I've got a bit of a backlog because it's taken quite a while to collate and film all the various aspects for this series of videos. So as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.